Mike, thanks for that nice introduction. It's great to be here with all of you, to Paul Sukit and to all of you who are not only managers for Basin Electric, but directors from all the member cooperatives. Thanks to you, thanks to Basin for what you do, serving 9 states, almost 3 million customers. Pretty amazing. And you do it so well, so dependably. And so I want to thank you for what you do and also tell you that I believe that we in the public sector need to make sure we're helping you do that. Not making it harder to do that, making it easier to do what you do so well. And it's important not just for your company, for your consumers, but it's really important for our economy. You are a foundational industry. You literally make things go. And so your ability to provide low-cost, dependable energy is vital for us continuing to build our economy, create good jobs, not only the jobs you create directly, but all the other jobs that are created by so many industries that you power. And we, of course, are in a global economy and a global competition. That's reality. We can choose to compete or choose not to compete, but we are in a competition in a global economy. And the reality is we want to compete and we want to win. And to do that, we've got to create a good business climate, not just in this state, but in this nation. That has always been the hallmark of America, is that it is a great place to do business. And if you look at North Dakota in recent years, I had the great fortune, Mike and I had the great fortune to serve as governor and first lady for a decade in this state. Our driving focus was to build the best possible business climate so the great entrepreneurial and business talents of our businesses and our people here in North Dakota could rise up and, as I said, compete and succeed and win. And by any measure, that's going on in North Dakota. The challenge we have today is to make, and other states around us, but the challenge we have today is to make sure that we're doing that as a nation. And you see it very directly in your industry sector, but it's true across all industry sectors. So I'm going to talk about a few things today that I think go to that very important issue, specifically as regards your enterprise and how we can truly make this a better business climate, better business environment for you. And that's why I start out making the point that that's not just important to you and your consumers, but because you are truly a foundational industry, it's important to so many other industries as well. So I'm going to start by talking about what I call a state's first all of the above energy plan, which truly empowers energy development and production across this great country. The idea in the United States of America, our 50 states, was that the states would be the laboratories of democracy and that we would have a nation within which each of these states could do amazing things. They could excel based on their abilities and the attributes unique to their individual state. And so instead of a federal one-size-fits-all approach to everything, the idea was we were going to empower the states to do great things, and different states would do different great things. But increasingly today, we've gotten to this federalized, one-size-fits-all approach. You see that with EPA, you see that with the other agencies, you see that with regulation across the board, and it's creating terrible problems for our economy in this country, not just in energy, but across every energy sector, whether it's agriculture, banking, and the ability of small businesses to get credit. Not the big guys will always get credit. The small businesses across this country, their ability to get credit, and for bankers to make that risk return decision so that we can provide credit to small business or manufacturing or high tech or you name it. But we've got to get back to a regulatory approach where it's clear, understandable, and it empowers investment, where we do things right and we do things well, but that both the regulation and the regulator understand that the role is to empower investment, to empower entrepreneurship, to empower the development and deployment of technologies that will produce more energy and do it with better environmental stewardship, not block, obfuscate, and hold things up that prevent our economy from moving forward, that prevent the deployment of new technologies and new energies that will produce more energy, more cost effectively, more dependably, and with better environmental stewardship. Because that's exactly what you do. You invest hundreds of millions and billions along with your brothers and sisters in this great energy industry, and not only produce more energy, more cost effectively, more dependably, but you do it with better environmental stewardship. And that is the real success story that you demonstrate every day. So when we talk about CO2 rules, or how we manage water, or coal ash, or any of these other industries, stream buffer rules, it's very important that we have a regulatory environment that works, enables you to do what you do so very well. I think with the recent election, we have a better chance to build a better business climate and the kind of energy plan for this country that we worked so hard to build over the past decade for this state. Our energy plan here in North Dakota is Empower North Dakota. And what it does is we try to empower the development of all types of industry, both traditional and renewable. North Dakotans have responded, you have responded, great things are happening here. We need to do the same thing at the federal level. And we have to start by knocking back some of this over-regulation that's making it so difficult to do business. So on CO2 rules, as you know, Congress refused to implement cap and trade. Congress refused to implement cap and trade on CO2. So the administration decided they would go around Congress. And through the EPA, they are administering, in essence, limitations on CO2. You know that, both on existing plants and on any new plant built. How do we address that? I think the best way to address that would be with legislation that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and I, bipartisan, Republican, Democrat, he and I put forward essentially the same legislation that Ed Whitfield put forward and passed in the House. What does it do? It says that for any new plant, that you can't impose a CO2 limitation on those new plants until you, and of course what the EPA is trying to do is have a gas equivalency, natural gas equivalency for CO2 emissions. But you can't impose that kind of standard or other standard on CO2 until 6 new plants have been built and demonstrated that it is viable. And I don't mean technically viable, I mean commercially viable. Commercially viable. And only once 6 more plants have been built and demonstrated commercial viability at a certain reasonable level, then and only then can you begin to move forward with some kind of standard. That's for new plants. For existing plants, it says no imposition of CO2 limitations until Congress votes to do so. Imagine that. That is how our government works, checks and balances, judicial, legislative, and executive. It is up to the legislative to make a determination as to what the law should be. So that, in essence, restores the proper balance, which is that until Congress says that those CO2 limitations can be imposed, they cannot be imposed. That would be the best solution. What that requires, though, is that we get 60 votes on the Senate floor. I think after the first of the year, we'll get a chance at passing that legislation in the Senate. The question will be whether or not we can get 60 votes. And so that's something we'll be working with your people on to see whether or not we can get 60 votes. Now, if we can't get 60 votes to authorize that measure, so then rather than going through the authorization process, we would have to work through the appropriations process. As Mike said when he introduced me, I am a member of the Appropriations Committee, and I'll be chairman of one of the Appropriations Subcommittee. Either way, I will be on the Energy and Water Subcommittee, as I am now. In the Energy and Water Subcommittee, we provide funding for EPA. One of the measures that we have already introduced into the Energy and Water Subcommittee is that we will not allow EPA to use any funds to implement or administer their CO2 rules. No money to implement or administer those rules. And we have the votes to pass that. And I believe that would effectively block their CO2 limitations. Now, the reason that that hasn't passed so far is because that the chairman of the committee, Dianne Feinstein, will not let that measure come up for a vote. But that will change after the first of the year. And in all likelihood, Lamar Alexander of Tennessee will be the chairman of that subcommittee, and that measure will come up for a vote. and I believe we will have the votes to implement it. At that point, then, the measure, it effectively stops that regulation through what's called defunding. Then that bill goes up to the Senate floor. At that point, it takes 60 votes to reverse it. 60 votes to reverse it. So I think we would hold it on the Senate floor. That would defund the measure, and then it's up to President Obama to determine what he does. So I think we have a good chance to defund. It would be best to deauthorize, I think, or to authorize legislation that does what I laid out. Senator Manchin and I have a bill to do that. If we can't authorize the proper approach, we will try to defund the improper approach that the EPA is taking and going around Congress. The issue there will be, as part of an appropriation measure, what does the president do with it? Same thing for the waters of the U.S. The EPA has proposed a rule called Waters of the U.S. Most of you know about it. I'm sure a lot of you have ag backgrounds. Huge issue for our farmers and ranchers. Huge issue for our farmers and ranchers. I contend it's an issue for you and far beyond. I think it's truly an invasion of private property rights. It is, in essence, the EPA stepping up and unilaterally saying, well, they have the authority to regulate navigable bodies of water. Now, unilaterally, they are going to take upon themselves, without authorization, the authority, without legislation, they've just decided they are going to extend their authority to regulating all water, not just navigable bodies of water, as the law provides, but all water. Think about that. You have water on your farm or your ranch, or if you have a number of acres on your property, might be there sometimes, might not be there sometimes, or if you have water on any one of your facilities or anything else. Or if you're a manufacturing plant, you have water. Doesn't have to be navigable. EPA can come in and say that they have regulatory jurisdiction over that. How are you going to know what you can do or when you can do something on your own property when you have water there that's not connected to any other water? Might be ephemeral, might be there sometimes, might not be there other times. You need a permit to do something? How are you going to know? EPA is going to set up, thousands of rules of guidelines, and you're going to figure out when you can and cannot do something in regards to water on your property? Think about it. So it's absolutely unworkable, and we have to address it. We would address it in the same way. Again, I have legislation to handle it through authorization. If we can't get that done, we'll try to defund it in the same way that I described with the CO2 rules. Another one very important, coal ash. Let me touch on just a minute, and I want to be careful not to go on here too long, but coal ash. We have a bill in that would allow recycling of coal ash and make sure that it is not classified as a hazardous waste, and also provide reasonable standards for containment, coal ash containment, when you landfill coal ash. This is really important because all of you are taking coal ash and you're recycling it into all kinds of building products, not just products for roads, but buildings and many other uses. Boy, that's going to work great if EPA decides to classify it as hazardous waste, right? That's going to work great. You go to build a building and say, oh, well, yeah, it's classified as hazardous waste, but it's not really. That'll work good, won't it? Probably not. So we have a bill in, coal ash recycling, and I think we've got a shot to get it passed. Now, that's been held up because it has to go through the EPW, Environment and Public Works Committee. Senator Boxer, as you know, is a very strong advocate against coal, use of any kind. She's the chairman right now. She will not let our legislation advance through the committee. After the first of the year, Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma will be the chairman of that committee, and he is a very strong supporter of our legislation. We will get it through the committee. The key is that we can get 60 votes on the floor. Now, at one time, Senator Conrad and I had 12 Republican and 12 Democrat sponsors on the bill. So we have a fighting shot to actually pass this one on the floor. And that's something we've got to work with your folks on, to see that we get it through the committee and up to the floor and try to get that legislation passed. Stream buffer rules, same kind of thing. Very important. We've got the same kind of approach going on stream buffer rules. Water heater, I've been asked to mention water heater. I've got a legislation in there to address the water heater issue, which I know is important to all of you. It will pass. I don't know that I'll get it done this year. I think we're going to be very limited in what finishes out this year. I think you're going to see that we'll work on continuing resolution or omnibus to finish funding through the balance of the year and into next year, a defense authorization bill, and then we've got to do something, in my opinion, on tax extenders, particularly Section 179 depreciation for our farmers. Vitally important we get something done there. I'm hopeful we can get something done on tax extenders before the end of the year. I don't know that you'll see much more than that. The president wants some funding on Ebola, and the defense author will address the ISIS issue. And I believe Senator Reid's going to try to push a lot of appointments through, because those are lifetime type of appointments. He changed the rules so he can push those through with no Republican votes. So he'll push as many of those as he can. But that's what I look for beyond year end. So I think water heaters will be next year, but I've got the water heater legislation in. I think I've got more than enough support to pass it. I really believe we'll get it next year. I know it's an important issue to you. I believe we'll have it for you next year. I'm going to finish on Keystone for just a minute and just wrap up. I know I've gone maybe a little long here. But the reason I'm finishing on Keystone is because I think it's going to be a test case as to how some of this energy legislation is going to go. So I'd actually put in a Keystone bill before, which I was able to pass with 72 votes, because we attached it to the payroll tax holiday, which was something the president supported. So we passed the legislation which required him to make a decision, this was in 2012, on Keystone. And he made a decision. He turned it down. People forget this, but we have been working on this 6 years, so I understand why somebody might forget. He turned it down on the basis of the route in Nebraska. And you'll remember then we went through all this work to reroute. Nebraska went through all this work to reroute in Nebraska, address that issue. So I have a bill now that approves Keystone XL pipeline congressionally. Instead of the president approving it, we did the research, and under the Foreign Commerce Clause, Congress actually has the authority to approve this infrastructure project and cross-boundary project under its authority to regulate commerce or oversee commerce with foreign nations. So we've got a bill that would just approve it congressionally. I've got 57 supporters on my bill. With the election, we now have over 60 people who've committed. So I'm over 60. So early next year, we'll bring that bill up, and you've seen that there's been a lot of comment on it already. So my bill will come up first quarter probably of next year. We'll bring it up, and we'll pass it with more than 60 votes. It will go to the president. And this is a bit of a test case, and it's a test case because on the merits, it's a no-brainer. It's energy, it's jobs, it's economic growth, it's national security. Doesn't cost federal government one penny, but will generate all kinds of tax revenue. So on the merits, it's a no-brainer. And it has overwhelming public support. I mean, I think the lowest it's ever polled publicly is support in the 60s, and some of these polls, it's over 70%. So we'll see if the president will sign it or whether he vetoes the bill. See if he'll actually start to engage with us on some of this important legislation. And we hope we will. He will, and he may. We'll see. If he doesn't, then we'll bring it back and we'll attach it to something else. So I believe we'll get it passed. But it's a chance to see if we can start to break the gridlock, which is what we need to do in Washington, D.C. Think about it. How do we build the right kind of energy plan for this country if we don't build the infrastructure it takes to move that energy where it needs to go? And think of all the ramifications that go with it. It's not just about energy. Because we can't build Keystone and other pipelines, look what's happening to our grain shipments. We are backlogged on the rail for ag products and grain and, coal, because we can't build enough pipelines. We need that infrastructure as part of an energy plan that truly makes this nation energy secure. So we've got to be able to do these things for the foundational industries in our economy to make this economy go. And everybody wins. Everybody wins. Good jobs, competitive in a global economy, and that new technology drives better stewardship. Building those pipelines makes us safer and actually reduces greenhouse gas emissions because you're not moving that product on a ship. Or in the case of Keystone XL, you're not having to have 1,400 rail cars a day move that product because you're moving it through a pipeline. See, that's the kind of common sense we have here in North Dakota. That's the kind of common sense that the managers and the directors of Basin Electric have and demonstrate every single day of the week. And that's the kind of common sense and the results that the American people want from our government. And that's what we have to work to do. And I'm optimistic and hopeful that we can do much more of it in the future. Thank you again for what you do, for inviting me to be with you, and to all of you, have a great annual meeting. God bless.